All right, folks. More fun with Dr. Clark's book, Dark Ghetto. We're going to do the one about Negro women and white men later. But we're going to deal with right now the Negro matriarchy and the distorted masculine image. Okay, something I found kind of interesting. Sexual hierarchy has played a crucial role in the structure and pathology of the Negro family. Because of the system of slavery in which the Negro male was systematically used as a stud, is something that Tommy Curry has said, and the Negro family primarily used for the purposes of breeding and for, wait for it, gratification of the white male. The only source of the family continuity was through the female. The dependence of the child was on his mother. This pattern, together with the continued post-slavery relegation of the Negro male to menial and subservient status, has made the female the dominant person in the Negro family. Psychologically, the Negro male could not support his normal desire for dominance. For the most part, he was not allowed to be the consistent wage earner. He could not present himself to his wife and children as a person who had the opportunity or ability to compete successfully in politics, business, and industry. That's what black women call building. This stuff is not new. His doubts concerning his personal adequacy was therefore reduced. He was compelled to base his self-esteem instead on the kind of behavior that tend to support a stereotyped picture of the Negro male: sexual impulsiveness, irresponsibility, verbal bombast, posturing, compensatory achievement in entertainment and athletics, particularly in sports like boxing, in which athletic prowess could be exploited for the gain of others. Doesn't that sound like Future? The Negro male was therefore driven to seek status in ways which seemed either antisocial, escapist, and socially irresponsible. The pressure to find relief from his intolerable psychological position seems directly related to the continued high incidence of desertions and broken homes in the Negro ghetto. This is where we're talking about the lower classes and the pathology. And where it comes from, I've been saying since I got on here, really since you did the Money Report, this is where it comes from. It comes directly from slavery. I don't know how many of your scholars have to tell you the connection. This is not new. This is not new. Like, we never heard this before. Slavery was so long ago. They knew this back in the 60s. Frazier knew it back in the 30s. Du Bois knew it back in the 1800s. It's not new. The Negro woman, in turn, that's where the strong black woman comes from, been required to hold down the family together, set goals, stimulate, encourage, to protect both black boys and girls. Not really. Her compensatory strength tended to perpetuate the weaker role of the Negro male. Negro boys had the additional problem of finding no strong male father figure upon which to model their own behavior. Perhaps one of the reasons for the prevalent idea among marginal Negroes is that it is not masculine to sustain a stable father or a husband relationship with a woman. Many young men establish temporary liaisons with a number of different women with no responsibility. And this is what he's talking about. This is actually in the lower classes. It's the so-called lower classes, right? Which has become pathological in all the classes. Because you see this in all the classes now. The marginal young Negro male tends to identify his masculinity with you can't make this shit up, right? Cannot make this shit up. The marginal young Negro male tends to identify his masculinity with the number of girls he can attract. The high incidence of illegitimacy among Negro young people reflects this pervasive fact. They're not only young now, okay? In this compensatory distortion of the male image, masculinity is therefore equated with the alleged sexual prowess. That's how come a lot of people get offended when I say that you're a concubine. And I always say that a lot of black men look at their masculinity through the lens of what? A woman's vagina. Can you lay, bid, and be a stud or concubine to a black woman? Because there's only three places in the gynocracy for a black male, okay? Child is one, okay? But the other two, the ones we focus on, is either concubine or a resource or provider. The protector is a different animal. That's all matriarchies. But in the black community, the concubine, sexual partner, or provider. That's where you get the dual mating strategy. That's the dual mating strategy that we talk about. That's literally the Russell Wilson versus Future argument that we talk about. It's right there. What they call Russell Wilson, the provider male, right? He is the archetype for the provider male, right? And Future is the archetype for the concubine. Okay, they're describing him right here. This is the. I'm not talking about Future himself, right? Because I'm sure behind that mask, behind all the other crap that he does to get attention, I'm sure Future's a middle class guy. The thing is, the image and the archetype that Future presents versus Russell Wilson's archetype. This old battle for the black community is not new. It's not new. Been around for a long time. Clark, this is how come Clark actually talked about this, and this is what Moynihan actually put in his paper. You go back to Clark. Clark was doing this stuff in the 40s. Clark came up with the doll test in the 40s, not the 50s, not the 60s, the 40s. In fact, I'm gonna have to do a video on the paper about Kenneth and Mamie Clark's doll test, the doll study. The middle class girl is able to resort to abortions, or she gives birth secretly, surrendering the child for adoption. Okay, that's closer to what white people used to do if she had a baby out of wedlock. In the case of marginal young people or the upwardly mobile Negro, what contraceptive ideas he has are unreliable, and rarely does the girl participate in protection, in part because it is taken as a sign of masculinity for the black male to supervise such matters. Illegitimacy among these groups, therefore, is a consequence in large part of poverty. What did the studies still say today, right? Black women use contraceptive the least, okay? And black men use condoms the most. This stuff is not new. It's still with us. History still has this by short hairs. People say, oh, that was so long ago. It's still with us. Here's also something. This is also the EL versus the street Negro wars, right? The middle-class Negro fears he will be identified with the Negro masses from whom he has escaped or tried to escape. And sex is the focal point of anxiety. The middle-class girl is often so rigidly protected that normal sexual behavior is inhibited, or she learns to be sophisticated by the use of contraceptives. For her, as for white middle-class girls, sex is tied to status and aspiration. She wants to make a good marriage. Marriage to white men might even be available. Okay, here's another clue. Person-to-person relationships are for many a compensation for society's rejection. They are, in a sense, forced to be quite elemental in their demands, and sex becomes more important for them than even they realize. They act in a cavalier fashion about their affairs, trying to seem casual and cool, but it is clear nonetheless they are dominated by the complexity of their needs. The girl, like the boy, has no illusions. Unlike middle-class girl who believes or demands that each relationship should be forever and tries to hold on to the boy, marginal Negro lower-class girl is realistic about the facts of her situation. Nor does she expect to hold on to the boy. Sex is important to her, but it is not, as in the middle-class society, a symbol of status to be used to rise to a better family or higher income bracket. The marginal Negro female uses her sex instead to gain personal affirmation. She is desired, and that is almost enough. The relationship, whatever its social and psychological limitation, is pure in the same sense as innocence. That is, it is not contaminated by other goals. For her and for the boy, sex is time contained with its own intrinsic worth and value, not animal in its expression, but related to the urgent human need for acceptance. It is sophisticated but not primitive. That's called attention. Why do you think black women especially, and increasingly white women, looking for attention because of this anxiety, because of the perceived psychological limitations, are thoughtened. That's what the BBLs are for. That's what the breasts are for. That's what all this freaking makeup is for on social media. Okay, this is compensatory. This stuff is not new. We recognized this back in the 60s. This is the lower class pathology, the ghetto pathology that is permeated the society. This innocent sophistication includes the total acceptance of the child if a child comes. In the ghetto, the meaning of the illegitimate child is not ultimate disgrace. There is not the demand for abortion or for surrender of the child that one finds in more privileged communities. In the middle class, the disgrace of illegitimacy is tied to personal and family aspirations. In lower class families, on the other hand, the girl only loses some of her already limited options by having an illegitimate child. She is not going to make a better marriage or improve her economic and social status either way. On the contrary, a child is a symbol of the fact that she is a woman and that she may gain from having something of her own. You hear that? You've heard that in Promises I Can Keep, a book study about single mothers in Philadelphia, the bulk of them black and brown. Nor is the boy who fathers an illegitimate child going to lose. For where is he going? The path to any higher status seems close to him in any case. They actually wrote a second book that actually highlighted exactly what they said about the boy. Illegitimacy in the ghetto cannot be understood or dealt with in terms of punitive hostility, as in the suggestion that unwed mothers be denied welfare if illegitimacy is repeated. Such approach is obscured with empty and at times hypocritical moralizing. The desperate yearning of the young for acceptance and identity, the need to be meaningful to someone else even for a moment without implication of a pledge of undying fealty and foreverness. If when the girl becomes pregnant, the boy deserts or refuses to marry her, it is often because neither can sustain an intimate relationship. Both seem incapable of the tenderness that continues beyond immediate gratification. And here's his remedy, okay, toward the end, okay. Until the lower class Negro is free to compete for and to win the socially acceptable rewards of the middle class society, the ghetto's pattern of venereal disease, illegitimacy, and family instability will remain unbroken. But when that time comes, no one can expect destructive sexual activity to cease abruptly. In other words, just because you take them out of their condition doesn't mean that their social patterns will not continue. That, once you form those social patterns as children, it's very difficult to break. In fact, we see that with what I call climbers, class climbers, like especially for women. I always get that question, okay, why does a woman with a master's or PhD, working in corporate America still have these ratchet tendencies, right? This is why, okay? Just because you take that girl out of that condition from which she is raised, put her in school, get her some degrees, give her a corporate job, doesn't mean her appetites are going to change. What is more likely is a shift to another, some would say, higher level of behavior. Then the Negro's sexual misbehavior will be indistinguishable in all respects from all of the respectables. In other words, it takes time for the shift, okay? They have to learn how to adapt, if they do, to a higher class system. With full participation in divorce, abortions, adultery, and the various forms of jaded, fashionable middle and upper class sexual explorations, there might even be the possibility of sexual fulfillment and health. Okay, and that is the part that I wanted to actually point out. Okay, this is why I said last time that it pretty much has permeated all classes. And once it permeates all classes, really, even if you take the black woman out of her condition, okay, out of the condition for which she grew up, she's still going to carry those tendencies. And the thing is, instead of she being absorbed into the middle class or even the upper middle class, and those kind of tendencies kind of evaporate, or she learns a higher level of a way to actually conduct herself, what's happening is you're flooding the middle class and even the upper middle class with what we call lower class behavior, right? That you're spreading. So basically what it has done is, instead of the upper class or upper middle class cleansing these people of these negative behaviors is actually, these people are actually carrying this particular pathology into the upper and middle classes, to the point where it's, if you, especially if you have a show like Love and Hip Hop or those kind of reality shows, what they're doing is they're basically spreading this pathology to people that probably had never been in the ghetto. That's like when you got suburban kids that never been in the ghetto looking to emulate the same folks that they've never even met for the most part. Okay, because social media and TV and these kind of shows have actually infected these people with the lower class behavior. And since the black folks have this, what I call class compression, right, already, where we were only one or two generations, well, really one generation outside of being, being an urban ghetto. Most people, right? Only one, maybe two generations, you're outside the urban ghetto. You're not far enough away. Okay, that you don't have cousins or other kind of folks or acquaintances that you can associate with. So when you go to the cookout, look at Lawrence at the cookout, okay, and Insecure. Even though he was not raised in that kind of society, he wasn't raised in the ghetto. But the thing is, a lot of the things that were in the ghetto, when he was living in Inglewood, right, his behavior was indistinguishable from the so-called thug folks. The way they talk, the way they interact, you can't tell the difference. Issa Rae, you cannot tell the difference between her and, say, Cardi B. Black culture is so indistinguishable from lower class urban ghetto culture that it's, like I said, it's penetrated so far. It's saying that every person is not the same. There's no part of black culture, from the richest to the poorest, that has not touched everybody in some shape, form, or fashion, from the music to the clothes to sexual habits. It's almost indistinguishable. You have, like I said, you have rich upper class people having a bunch of baby mamas. Not all of them, even in the lower classes, right? Even in middle class, you don't have a bunch of guys with a bunch of baby mamas. Like I said, you got a lot of guys in the working class that don't have any kids, never been married. Okay, don't do any of that kind of stuff. But the thing is, they're still affected by this kind of behavior, this kind of ideology. Clark said this in the 60s. Go pick up the book Dark Ghetto by Kenneth Clark, right? Because, like I said, Clark and Mamie, Kenneth and Mamie Clark actually did doll studies in the 40s. That's how come it was actually used in Brown versus Board of Education. Okay, it's actually used, still used today, still in used in multiple countries about the doll study. Well, I'll try to explore the doll study and Kenneth Clark and that kind of stuff tomorrow. I'll give a cursory glance at it, because to put all the different pieces together would take about a week to actually package it all together to where it's digestible. Because, man, there's tons of studies, there's tons of videos about the doll test and all kind of stuff. You could literally do a whole 2-hour documentary on just the doll study. That might be something to entertain. I don't know. I'll think about it. I'm not really a filmmaker, but anywho, some of this stuff actually deserves its own documentary. Okay. I wish I had known Dr. Clark when he was alive, because I would have loved to talk to him. Some people would have loved to talk to him. Okay. He's one of them. Even though we have our own Dr. Clark, we have our own, Frasers, and we got our own folks that are, like Dr. Johnson and Dr. Neal and Dr. Curry. Okay, even Dr. Gigi, I can't use his real name. Okay, there are current intelligentsias that are the new wave that could take up the mantle and actually start doing this work. But in the meantime, that's all I got for this one. Pick up the book, man. It's a fascinating read, and it tells you that a lot of stuff that we deal with is still with us. In fact, as Moynihan said, even Clark said, they never knew that it would get this bad. They always thought that the pathology of the urban ghetto classes, which was a small portion, I would say maybe 20%, they didn't know that it would actually permeate the whole structure. The whole structure we call ADOS or black culture, or what they called Negro culture back then. They had no clue that it would get this bad. And Moynihan said if he had known it would get this bad, he would just ignored it. He would just done a benign neglect on the whole thing. He thought he could actually arrest this development and keep it from penetrating to the upper classes. But had he known that it was would penetrate not only the upper classes of black folks, but also embed itself into other cultures like Latino and white, he probably said he would have never said anything. But anyhow, with that, I'm going to jump off here. This beat just out, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.